Greetings, Culture Warriors. This is Jeff Vieira, author of Culture is Everything, bringing you another dispatch from the front. This one's going to be a little different today. You know, we talked a lot about culture and values. Listeners will recall that I define culture as the manner by which an organization's values are communicated, understood, and lived by its members. So values are very important. Values are the information content of the culture. It's the key to unlocking the behavior that we want to see of our employees whenever they're doing their work. So values are essential. And in these podcasts, we talked a lot about values. We analyze news, we look at companies, we talk about what their values are. We try and square, hey, here's their actions. What does that say about their real values, their values of their as-lived culture? And we go in some depth on that topic. Today, I want to take a little bit of a different angle at that. And I want to talk about a value which is very common when you look at company cultures. If you go out on the internet, if you look at their facilities and look at signs up on the wall indicating what their values are, very common value. I want to talk about a little bit in depth today. I'll be sharing some of my experiences with companies and that value, just to kind of explain a little bit of my thinking on that value. And that value is integrity. You'll see this in many a company's list of core values. Integrity. What do they mean by integrity? I'm a graduate of the Air Force Academy, and at the Air Force Academy, in the cadet area, you will see up on a wall, the cadets march by multiple times a day. A sign, a series of block letters, aluminum, that's bolted to the wall. And that sign says, "We will not lie, steal, or cheat, nor tolerate among us anyone who does." It's called the honor wall. And the honor system that is in place at the academy, and this is very similar to other service academies, so the Air Force is not unique in this regard, is taken very seriously. If you lie, steal, or cheat at the Air Force Academy, you are likely to be thrown out, expelled. There is an honor system in place which is enforced through a process that's called an honor board. And the honor board, advised by a serving commissioned officer, is run by cadets. Cadets enforce the system. So if you run afoul of the honor system, you wind up in front of an honor board and could well be expelled as a result. That is how seriously integrity is taken at the Air Force Academy. And you can see why. Many of the young men and women who are graduating from that institution are going to go on to lead other young men and women, potentially into combat, where lives are on the line. Even in ordinary operations, just exercises, lives are on the line. You're scrambling aircraft. Accidents can and do happen. So even in the best of times, someone's life is probably in your hands. When I was a young fuels officer, for example, my folks were the ones who were out there putting gas in jets. It's a dangerous job. In my day, they were doing that with a very flammable fuel known as JP4. It's very similar in a lot of ways to regular gasoline that you put in your car. And so if there was an ignition source around when you were filling up a jet with JP4, bad things can happen. You can have an explosion. You can kill people. When I was in Japan, we had cryogenic production plants that were my responsibility. One of the products that they produce is liquid oxygen, Liquid oxygen is highly reactive. This is used because it's pumped into the aircraft cockpit so that at high altitudes, the pilots can breathe. So liquid oxygen, if exposed to petroleum, tends to explode. The tarmac on a flight line has been exposed to lots of petroleum over the years. There have been plenty of fuel spills from damage done to aircraft and the need to repair those. And so you have to be very careful when servicing the liquid oxygen delivery system on an aircraft with liquid oxygen not to allow any chance that it interacts with oxygen, or you could get someone killed. When the plant is producing any small amount of petroleum introduced in line from, say, a leak could literally blow the plant up. We used to build them on the sides of hills overlooking bodies of water, because that way, if the plant blew up, it would slide down the hill and limit the amount of other people it killed. So it's a serious business being an Air Force officer. And the Academy takes very seriously the need to have officers with high integrity. Companies as well, especially as you start moving up the ranks, you become responsible for large amounts of money and large numbers of people. And in some cases, in some industries, in most industries probably, there is some risk of people losing their lives in the process of going about their daily work. So likewise, you want people to be of high integrity. Becomes vital. How often do we see in the news where people fail to live up to that standard, and it creates enormous problems, not just for themselves, but for the company as a whole? It's brought companies down. What happened to Enron? So integrity is very important as a core value, not just to have on your list of core values, not just to communicate to people through means such as the honor wall, but also to make sure that people understand it and live it. Because if integrity is not lived, it doesn't do much good. So in my career, I've seen this play out numerous times. I won't name names of the companies that they were at, because again, this was in the past. I don't want to imply that any of these companies have a problem with integrity today. I don't know. I can only tell you what I have experienced, in the hopes that as you compare it to what you have experienced, it will both underscore the need to really live out the value of integrity and help us as we're having discussions about values to make sure that integrity is always a top consideration. Because as I share in the book, ultimately the way you sustain a culture is in the decisions you make which impact that culture. And those include hiring and firing decisions. Those include the ways in which we enforce the rules, the policies, the procedures, the processes that we have in our business. So it's extremely important to make sure that integrity is a consideration. Otherwise, things start to fall apart very quickly. Let me give you some examples. So when I got out of the Air Force, I went to work for a major Fortune 500 company. And in the course of working for them, the business was under tremendous pressure. There was one year that we had to make an inventory turn target. It was very important that we do this. Everybody's bonus rided on it. Everybody rallied to help reduce the amount of inventory that we had so that we could lean it out and meet that objective. One plant met the objective in the way they did their inventory. So what they did was they loaded up all their within process material that they could on trailers, and they backed them away from the dock. They did their inventory, and then they pulled the trailers back to the dock and unloaded them. Now, there was no orders for this material. It was simply within process material. But if they had counted it as such, they would not have made that goal. So we, in effect, in that plant, cooked the books in order to make the goal. Doing something like that at the Air Force Academy would have been viewed as lying and stealing and cheating, all three, and gotten somebody kicked out. As far as I know, there was no consequence associated with this. It was whispered about, people knew about it, but there was no actual consequence to it. A few years later, the company ran into some serious issues, in part due to a suspicion that their numbers were not true. And you have to wonder if the tendency to cook the books didn't metastasize somehow, leading to serious, serious economic consequences for the company. Similar situation. I was working for a company when the tech bubble burst. And I'll never forget that the company had already been through a round of layoffs. People were nervous. We knew that the business situation was not great. And so we were all called in to the conference room. Our vice president wasn't there that day. He had something else going on. But he was so concerned for our concerns that he arranged a meeting with the president of the company. And so they call us into a conference room to have a meeting about the health of the company. So we show up for the meeting a little bit early, as you can expect, from the president of the company coming, and realize that there was a meeting in the conference room that had broken for lunch, where they had left their stuff behind. So that was the only conference room. There was nothing we could do but wait. So we waited in the conference room for someone else to show up. Well, you happen to look down on the desk and you see on top of somebody's pad a piece of paper that had Chapter 11 bankruptcy and a date that was the next month for that bankruptcy to occur. And further indicated prominently that the current holdup for it was negotiating the bonuses for the CEO and the CFO. Okay, so that was quickly passed around. So everybody in the room was aware of the situation. When the president came in, they noticed we were there. They very quickly, basically took us to a smaller room further away so we could have our meeting. And so he begins the meeting and he starts running down how strong the business is, how good the fundamentals are, and dead silence in the room. And so he picks up on the fact that we're not responding as he would expect us to, with relief, but that we were obviously disturbed about something. So he continues on and tries to give a kind of a rally around the coach speech. And at the end of it, he says, "So are you with me?" And there is dead silence in the room. Everyone just looking down at the table in front of him. So the meeting ends awkwardly, as you can imagine. And from that day on that team, no real work of any consequence was accomplished. For good reason. Everyone knew that the company's bankruptcy was imminent. And so everyone from that day flipped the switch to finding the next job. Okay. So now we know the senior leadership is not able to share everything they know. For starters, some things might not happen. But in any case, they have a responsibility to maintain confidentiality in some matters. That's not in question. But to know something and then intentionally tell your subordinates the opposite in an attempt to manipulate them, that's a different story. That was a rather rude wake-up call for some of us. Naturally, what happened, a few weeks later, they had the last round of layoffs. They had the bankruptcy. By that point, just about everyone I knew on our team had other work lined up. So they made good use of the time and the knowledge. But they lost a lot of faith, obviously, in the integrity of that leadership. Perhaps it didn't matter because the company went bankrupt anyway. I'm sure that contributed in some fashion to the company going bankrupt ultimately. I'm sure it wasn't 100% just a bad economic luck, if you will. But there you have it. Another company I was working at, we were on a conference call chaired by the vice president of manufacturing. So we had all the plant managers on it, various support personnel such as myself on the call. During the call, the vice president of manufacturing was unveiling a new initiative that was designed to help us get better. So as he went through it, he paused for a moment, and we heard somebody on the phone say, this is just more corporate nonsense. We're not going to do any of this. Fill in your expletive of choice. So as you can imagine, there's dead silence on the phone after that. And then the VP of manufacturing just very coolly says, you forgot to take your phone off mute. Or you forgot to put your phone on mute. Sorry. Shortly thereafter, that plant manager was let go. And everyone knew why. But can you, if you were in the VP of manufacturing shoes, could you ever trust that person to be your plant manager again, knowing that rather than object to a new initiative publicly, openly, honestly, transparently, what he clearly intended to do was to simply undermine it. So he would tell the VP of manufacturing, oh, yeah, we'll do that. And then it never happened because he told his folks not to do it. Knowing that, the VP of manufacturing made the only call he could. Because integrity is important. I had a friend of mine who I knew very well who had bounced between financial institutions. So very, very common even back in the day. Folks you would work and you would push your career at one institution. You would get kind of to a plateau. A recruiter from another would call you up, and then you would go work for them to kind of continue the growth path. And eventually you might even come back to the same financial institution you left in the first place and continue on. There was a lot of movement of people at these institutions. And so he had gone off and done work for another company, came back to an institution he'd worked for previously, and was asked to violate the confidentiality of the company he'd come from. Share their secrets. They knew he was privy to them. He was asked to exploit them. Being an honorable professional, he refused. And he was punished for it. Now, I can't draw a straight causal line here, but shortly after this, he passed away from a heart attack. I can only imagine that the stress of the situation didn't help his heart condition. Sometimes integrity is life and death. I was working at a company where part of my job involved identifying opportunities to help the company reduce costs. This has been a common thread throughout my career. As part of the effort, I was looking at some data from a system I managed and mining it as best I could to identify the best opportunities to help us out because we were in a very challenging business situation. All along the way, we had colleagues who were in different positions throughout the operation who we brought along with this analysis because, it's not enough just to have the data. You have to be able to understand it. You have to make sure it's real, that it applies. At various points when we wanted to prove out different opportunities, I would go to the site and work with the team there, and together we'd validate it. Then budget time came around, and suddenly the people that had been with us every step of the way on these opportunities, not all of them, but some of them, started to claim there was no opportunity at all. Having not been invited to the conversation, I didn't know this, and was in a meeting around the transformation of the company when they basically repudiated the numbers that I had provided and we had validated together. And I was put on the spot and asked, well, what do you make of this? And I had a fork in the road. I could be honest and know there would be blowback, or I could be dishonest and try and slide. I told the truth. I hadn't seen the numbers. I would have to see the numbers before I could weigh in with any opinion on them. I was pulled aside shortly thereafter and given an offer to recant my numbers. I offered to do so long as they could tell me what was wrong with them. I said, look, if there's any error in these numbers, I'll be glad to validate it and own up to it. Mistakes can be made. And then the answer I was given was, well, we were kind of hoping you would do that. Meaning I would come up with some plausible sounding reason for repudiating the numbers. I refused to do it. And a couple of weeks later, as you might expect, I was offered the choice of a diminished role or a severance package. And I took the severance package. Because once you realize that there is an integrity issue and one that is not likely to get cleaned up, all things considered, you have a choice to make. You can try and ride it out, or you can get out. And I would argue that most of the time in that situation, you're better off getting out. There had been a warning sign earlier that I should have paid attention to. An employee who left the company as she was leaving sent me an email and gave detail as to how one of the facilities was gaming our system. I forwarded that on to the executive, who I thought was a friend, and he kind of downplayed it in a way that raised eyebrows with me. So I took that to the person who was running manufacturing operations. This person was a Navy veteran, so I could count on him having similar values to those that I was familiar with from my Air Force days. And to his credit, he told all of his subordinates that if he caught anyone playing games with the system, that would be their last day at the company. This was a company that featured integrity as a core value. It was out front on their signage. Walk past it every day. Well known for integrity. And he pointed that out and clearly indicated he wouldn't tolerate it. Okay. So I'd emerged from that discussion pleased because leadership did what leadership should do. They defended the values of the culture. They enforced it. And so that gave me more confidence. Of course, people change. Leadership changes. And once this person wasn't there anymore, the situation changed, which allows for situations such as I described. So the lesson you take away, I think, from the importance of the value of integrity is that with any value, there are going to come within your career times of choice where you must choose between that value and a behavior which conflicts with that value. Core to how we analyze company cultures is how often does the behavior conflict with the value? And you look for crisis moments in the company's history to really underscore that, because that stress will come out. At each of the companies I've talked about obliquely today, they were at crisis points. Stress was high. These were tough times in the history of their business. And that, no doubt, is why such pressure was brought to bear on the value of integrity. Because that is when there's going to be a strong temptation to do the wrong thing. And that is the time when it is most important to do the right thing, to be the example, to support the value. Because even if you bear the pain from that, and you will, at least others see that and have the chance to do the right thing going forward. They can right the ship, they can fix it. Moreover, it exposes people who do not share those values, which can be a very useful thing. So I leave you with this. Whenever you see integrity on a company's list of core values, be extra diligent in assessing behavior. Look at how it plays out. Because if a company with integrity as a core value is constantly on the edge in terms of their practices, they're in the news all the time for shady dealings. You talk with people and they lie about little things. So you're going through your interview process, you're trying to assess whether to join the company, and just little minor lies are apparent in that process. They're not open, transparent, honest. Then that's a company you want to stay away from. Because if they're not living out the value of integrity, then how do you think they're going to honor their bond by you? Do you think that what was agreed upon when you hired on is going to be upheld? Can you trust them as you move through your career to make decisions for the right reasons? Many of these roles have some sort of bonus opportunity. What good is the bonus opportunity if the goalposts shift partway through? What good are stock options if the company is going to be on the front page of the papers for doing something illegal soon? Keep an eye out for integrity as a core value. Companies should have it as a core value, and they should live it in their practices. That's kind of the minimum you should accept for an enterprise that you are going to give so much of your life to forwarding. Today, I'm going to leave you with integrity above all. Have a great day.